we welcome Annie Shaw from the British Film Institute, and her presentation is entitled The Computer Says Yes, which is always a good start, Codifying Risks and Legal Uncertainty for Mass Clearances. Thank you. Do you want this one or that one?
I'll try this one. See how it goes. Right, thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry about the delay. Right, yes, I'm going to jump straight into what we're going to be talking about, seeing as we've swallowed up a bit of time. So I'm going to be talking about the project that this is all focused on, and in particular, the landscape, the rights landscape that we're dealing with for this huge project that finished at the end of last year. And in particular, we're going to focus in on how we categorized and codified the many different kinds of risks, many different kinds of rights holders involved in this project, and the tools that we came up to do that, how we kind of tracked things, and then show you some of the outcomes, what was actually the final result of what we did. And I have a few sort of reflections on how the tools were used, also some thoughts about possibly longer-term challenges that might come up from doing project-based or project-driven rights work, as opposed to sort of ongoing legacy rights work that we might do. Why I'm talking about this? So it's not new. It's not new, difficulties, fears, navigating copyright. I love copyright. I've been working in copyright my entire career, most of the 21st century. But I know that there are a lot of misunderstandings, myths, and fears about copyright people might tend to avoid if possible. And as an archive, the BFI is, I should probably say what the BFI is, British Film Institute. We are the UK's lead body for film, and we look after the BFI National Archive, so the Film and Television Archive of the UK. And we are a public body, so fulfilling our public interest missions to provide access to collections is obviously a key part of what we do. We also do not own the rights to probably about 98% of what we hold in the archive. And with mass clearance projects like this, we've done another one earlier, which was based on looking at film. This project really looks at a mixture of film, but also made for broadcast programs. And our approach to that has been adopting this blended approach of compliance and risk. So the project itself, Heritage 2022, it actually finished last year. That's because we had COVID in the middle of it. But this was a huge, ambitious project. Really led initially by the preservation aspect of it to preserve 100,000 tapes that were held in our collections and the collections of the regional national archives, film archives of the UK. And the access part of it, there were several sort of strands around potential access, but the main one was to develop a free digital service for UK public libraries. And this service called BFI Replay, which is up for an award here, was the sort of the main sort of flagship outcome of this project. So, into the rights and content landscape. Our initial challenges. So, as I mentioned, the material we were looking at was a very diverse mix of broadcast and non-broadcast, professional, amateur, all manner of different kind of genres and categories of works. And because this project is multi-strand, it was working in parallel with the digitization workflow, with the curatorial workflow for what we might want to put onto this new service called BFI Replay, and then us in rights trying to figure out how on earth to make sense of these huge spreadsheets. The particular challenge for us was the way that the content was selected initially was all based on digitization. So the decisions about what was being digitized for preservation that might be selected on the basis of who the donor was. There might be a sort of catch-all name for various things like ITV Broadcast Masters or archive activity, adverts, and obviously within those, there might be a multitude, indeed there were a multitude of different rights holders. So we might get a spreadsheet of one digitization collection, and when we divided that up into a rights holder-based collection, that might mean 78 different spreadsheets from that one spreadsheet. So 78 different rights holders. So we were splitting out and doing our initial work was to take this big list, work out who owned the different rights, and then obviously take forward our approach based on the rights holder. The other challenge was limited metadata, particularly limited rights metadata. So in certain cases, there was no information about production company, director, any cast or crew. Obviously, in some there were. We did have information about the broadcasters, production companies, but it was very mixed. So a lot of the work that we were doing was that initial research to try and work out who might own the rights to these. Oh, I've got some animations here I forgot to remove, sorry. So, okay, I hope this slide makes sense. So how we sort of broke things down. On the left, we had, this is from 900. Overall, we identified 900 different rights holders, and this is at the program level. This is not counting third-party rights. So you can see it's a big mix. A lot of film and TV production companies, an even bigger chunk of brands. I think in total, so from this 900, we had something like 298 different brands we identified, 220 film TV companies, and what you can't really see there at the top of that circle, you've got the BFI, so we are a rights holder for some things, and right next to that you've got the PSB, so public service broadcasters, and then looking across at the right-hand side one, just trying to get my left and right correct, we then just worked out overall how many works there were that we were looking at per this different kind of rights holder. So you can see immediately massive change. Public service broadcasters are by far the majority. BFI has a good chunk as well, which is really helpful for us. And then things get quite sort of, still we're talking large numbers. In terms of the overall numbers of works we were looking at was about 50,000. We weren't trying to clear 50,000, I should just make that really clear. We were aiming to clear around 16,000, which is still a sizable amount. But the reason we broke this down into these kind of categories was it helps us determine and think about our different kinds of approaches when we're making that initial contact with rights holders. We need to be aware of who it is we're talking to, how active they are as a rights holder, how familiar they are with what we are as the BFI, why their works are with us, and understanding around the norms of licensing, film exploitation, and the like. Obviously, with the PSBs, that was fine. For film and TV companies, again, that's fine. But a lot of the works that we were looking at were held by individuals or non-film television companies, and quite often have no clue about licensing, even that their works were held in our archive. So there's a lot of sort of education that we have to do when we make those initial approaches. Also for those smaller rights holders, license agreements are generally a no-no. We try and get very short form permission letters done instead, because if it's an individual, they're not really willing to, they might get scared off by a license agreement where they feel they might need legal advice. So we prepared these different kinds of agreements and permission letters. So we had that all ready to go when we were making the initial contact, ultimately with the aim of trying to hook the rights holder into engaging with us at least. We were also trying to step back, and I realize you probably can't read the text here, but this was, and I apologize, this may not be 100% accurate, but what we were trying to do here is understand a bit more of the kind of overall landscape for UK broadcast. I should point out also that given the majority of broadcast material we were dealing with, this is the first time that we've done a really big project based on TV. Most of the big projects we've done before have all been about film, non-broadcast. So we wanted to get a sense of the world that we were dealing with. So this is my kind of attempt to set out the kind of history of regulatory and rights landscapes with TV production in the UK. So the majority of what we were looking at really came from the late 70s, 80s, 90s into the early 2000s. That was the most amount of broadcast material we were trying to clear. And then just looking at the third-party rights, so where we've got the broadcasters, producers and independents, we don't have much by way of collective management rights organisations in the UK for the audiovisual sector at all. There are one or two, but not very much. We do have collective management groups for the performers, writers and music, so we were relying on getting blanket agreements with them for this project. And then for the remainder of third-party rights, so stills, artworks, other footage and directors, well, that's where we were taking risk. So that just gave us a bit of a context to refer back to, and if there's any errors in there, not that you'll be able to read them probably, let me know. So how do we actually break down risks as categories, and then how do we codify them into something that's going to help us do all these clearances? And I'll talk a little bit about some of the additional risk mitigations. And again, animations we don't need. So how we break down risk criteria. So we look at risk from the context of what the ultimate use is of the work. I love it, all the cameras are up. And also what kind of content it is, what kind of material it is, what the production context is, the different layers of rights we're going to have to deal with, and also the nature of the rights holder. Do we know the rights holder? Are they active? Would they be do they enforce their rights a lot or not? So I'm not going to read any of these things, but there you are, you're taking pictures. So the way we come up with a risk score is really to look at the content and the rights column, then look at what the output is, what the usage is, and from there we kind of come up with a score. So for this project, BFI Replay, it's in public libraries, so it's only available in physical venues. It's considered low risk. So therefore we might have a high risk work based on the type of content, type of rights holder, but the use itself is low. So we might say that may still be a high risk work, but it might be mitigated slightly. You can lessen it by saying actually, well, the use is low risk, so it might take it as a medium risk overall. There will be other kinds of criteria that, you can add to these, but these are some of the key ones that we included, that we've used on a few previous projects as well. So risk isn't really static. We have a score. We gave a score of like a 1 or a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And that's based on use, content, and rights risk. We then flow it through, working with all the different workflows of this project. So curatorial priority, that was a key thing, whether our curatorial colleagues really wanted this particular work or this collection to be part of the service. Now, sometimes we work seamlessly together, other times it's a bit challenging. So in particular, some of our curatorial colleagues were very interested in adverts, and we kind of went, we found adverts quite tricky sometimes. Then, once you make your initial response, or you get the initial response, if you get a response even, when you're first trying to contact a rights holder, that will kind of play on whether you think this is going to go or not. You might get no response, you might get we're too busy. Again, this is a big issue around how you're trying to engage a particularly very big rights holder. This is a non-commercial prospect for them, they're not going to make any money out of it, so it's going to go to the bottom of their in-tray. So how do you try and nag them and be very tenacious, I should say, about trying to get an answer? Also take into account the blanket third-party rights agreement. So we have blanket agreements with PRS and PPL, so the two largest music sound recording collecting societies we have in the UK. We also have one with the Performers Alliance, so they represent the actors, performers and writers for TV material. So we have a blanket agreement with them. These took most of the period of the project to actually finalise, so it was quite a long negotiation. And then you get it licensed, or you don't. So if it's not licensed by the program rights holder, you may decide on taking a risk. If you never got a response, you might decide on taking a risk. But that all flows through a particular process that we had on who would sign off on that risk. Okay, so I'm going to have to read from my notes for this bit, because this is the tool we used. It's a bit maths heavy. And I'm sorry I don't have like an animated version of this to show you actually how it worked. But, so, what we did was we divided the collections and the works into 3 rights layers. So, where you can see the column rights clearance level. So we have our acquisition, production agreement or donor agreement, third-party rights, excluding music, and then music third-party rights. And we assigned a value to those. So the acquisition donation agreement has a 50% value, and then the other 2 are 25%. It'll make sense in a minute, I hope. Then you can see we've got these columns, South Bank, schools, universities, replay. So these are all the different uses we were looking at trying to clear for. BFI Replay, which is our library service, was obviously the key one that we were focusing on, but in some cases we were trying to get wider rights as well. And then you get, and as we cleared these things, we would change it to yes. Percentage of usages cleared. So this is the number of uses cleared, so where there's a yes, for each level of the rights. That's then shown in the percentage bar. So you can see this 57% or whatever the other numbers are, 71%. Some have only got 14% cleared. The usage clearance complete column, which is the one next to it. So this indicates if enough usages have been cleared for the purposes of the project. Again, BFI Replay, the library service, is the key one here. For different rights clearance levels, there is a minimum percentage required for the level to be considered cleared. So, as I was saying, acquisition, donor, and third-party rights on this sort of formula, there's a minimum of 50% needing to be cleared for non-commercial use to be okay. And for music clearances, it was a 10% of clearance that's required. So if these minimums are all met, the particular rights clearance level will change to a yes under the usage clearance complete. And then each yes in the usage clearance complete contributes to the total percentage completed for a particular rights holder. And this is then measured against the rights risk score that we had assigned. So going back to these different criteria of high and low risk. And that then would ultimately determine if the work or the collections were ready to go for non-commercial. So you can see on this final column a yes. So I may need to sort of write that down again and send it out, because whether you followed it, I'm not sure. I don't think I did. So this was kind of, it was a handy way to kind of keep track of both clearances with the acquisition agreement or the production level. And as we were getting blanket agreements in for the other rights, we could block update a yes for particular uses, and slowly the percentages would creep up until we got enough to say, yes, we can put this on a non-commercial platform. Additional mitigations to just bear in mind. So in a few cases, particularly with the larger rights holders, we actually managed to incorporate our approach to risk, the risk criteria. We shared it with the rights holders, and it formed part of the contracts that we signed with them. So that was really new for us. We'd never done that before. So we've been fully transparent with the rights holder about how much risk we're taking, what kind of third-party rights we're just not going to try and clear, And for particularly the larger broadcasters, that worked. They accepted that, it was great. In addition, and this also was something that came from rights holders, was please can we have some money in escrow in the event that someone comes and claims and we do need to settle or pay for any infringement. That it's a very modest amount of money, but it's there. And then the third part is also that we take on the risk. So rights holders were not indemnifying us, not providing us with warranties. We would be the ones who, should it arise that something is not cleared, we're taking that risk on. I realise not all archives can do that, but we sort of felt confident that that would be fine for us to take, given the low-risk nature of the use. So, how we ended up. So, we did clear, in terms of titles from the BFI National Archive itself, 13,817. You can see we actually received 49,000 works. So we did do research on 49,000 works. That's where we got the 900 potential rights holders from. We actually ended up clearing with 398 different rights holders. There was various works we didn't clear, we didn't even try and clear. That might be not down to a rights, it might be down to curatorial, sort of thinking this isn't going to be a key part of the service that we're offering. And what I've got around the side is just some of the rights holders that we cleared with, some of the bigger ones. So in fact, interestingly, the largest rights holder by works on the platform is actually us, BFI. We have lots of old nationalised industry films that we now own the rights to. ITV, BBC, Channel 4, and I think the University of London were then all in the sort of top numbers in terms of numbers of rights cleared. So it was a good mix. All 3B here as well. We got some soap operas on there. Thanks, Dale. Thank you. So it's quite a good a mix of things. Obviously, there are lots more I could put on this. We only had 750 titles refused, which is pretty good going in terms of looking at that overall numbers. So, very quickly, so I'm not sure, am I running out of time? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Maybe I'll just go back. So, this is Replay. So if you're in the UK, go along to a public library and have a look at it. I just wanted to make a couple of kind of end reflections, I suppose, and conclusions on this. One is, so the team that I worked with, I haven't told you how many there were. So for most of the project, there were 2.5 people in rights team working on this. In the last year, we got an extra person. Thank you very much to Nikki Williams over there. So that was like hugely valuable. So a lot of this is why we do this is partly because we have limited time and we have limited resources. So we need to take a pragmatic approach on what we try and clear, what level of risk we're happy to live with. Interestingly, the team I worked with, they would much rather go the extra mile to try and make contact, get an agreement, get someone to sign something saying it's fine, rather than say, actually, we're going to put this through as a risk. I love them for it, but at some point, because you've got limited time, you have to sort of go, no, we have a framework in place for you to use. You have to be very clear on who's responsible for signing off that risk. It's not them, it's not the team who are doing all the research. It gets escalated up, so the higher the risk, the higher up the organisation it will go for ultimate sign-off. But it's interesting that they would rather get a kind of proper tick in terms of they've got a permission rather than risk it. And the other reflection on this is, and this is happening on this project and the previous one we did on film digitization. So when we're setting up these risk criteria, these frameworks, ultimately you're thinking about the end, the outcome, what it is you're aiming to do. The whole rationale you have is we need to clear X number of things by this time. So in effect, you're working from a sort of outputs-driven risk framework. In terms of legacy for the organization, there are some challenges with that. In this project, there was no out-of-copyright material, sadly. That would have been very easy. For film projects, we had a lot of out-of-copyright material. But if you're making up not making up, you're designing these frameworks, it's very easy for them to then be assumed that they can be used and applied for kind of anything. So, and the way we record it is also quite tricky. How do you record in a system what you're codifying as a type of risk for a particular use, and to be sure that you're not going to mislead any colleagues who think, oh, it was risk signed off for this, so we can use it for another use, like we could put it on YouTube, or we can do something commercial with it. And we haven't sort of managed to come up with a solution or a way to ensure that it's very clear when you're taking a risk, and even if it's just a risk on one layer of third-party rights in a program, whether you're taking the risk on the whole program, how do you kind of make that really clear for colleagues to then know that this risk was for a very particular project, for a very particular reason, is not something you rely on for other kinds of uses. So then, I mean, for me, in terms of ultimately what you'd want is an inputs-driven risk framework that could then help you catalog the risk, so that you can have a clear kind of framework that you could look up for any kind of use and then work out what you can and cannot do with something. That is that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Annie. What a success you've had, a real achievement. We did start late, so I just want to give an opportunity for people to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay. Please raise your hand if you want to ask. Tom's right at the back. No, I'm coming.
Thank you very much. Fascinating, and I can see lots of commercial applications for that model with other broadcasters. Just why, as a national institution, could you not clear this stuff under an instrument like the ERA Act, the ERA Plus license, or because it's only been used in libraries, as I understand?
Hold on. Yeah, so the ERA, the Educational Recording Agency in the UK. This project was a mix of broadcast, non-broadcast work, so we wouldn't have been able. ERA only covers broadcast material from public service broadcasters, and only for uses within educational establishments, schools and universities. Libraries are not educational establishments under the Copyright Designs Patents Act, so we had to clear. We did also look at the dedicated terminals exception, which in the UK I think is section 40B. That was something that came in with InfoSoc, I think. We make use of that exception within our premises in the UK. We did look at, would it be possible to find a way to make use of that exception in libraries, but again, no, because it's not a BFI venue, so yes. It would have been great if libraries were covered by the ERA scheme. Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Excellent presentation.
Thank you
so much. Just wondered, in terms of, you said you've been working on copyright for years, were there many lawyers on your team, if any? And are you one?
No, I'm not. I've studied copyright law, but I'm not a lawyer. Yes, so we have a legal counsel, I think actually he's general counsel and data protection officer at the BFI, so he was our lawyer in this respect. Where we get legal advice on things like scope of exceptions, obviously we do go out and get that. But yeah, so there's only one lawyer who, he's one lawyer for the whole BFI, so, but has been involved in kind of sense checking the risk. And for things like high risk, it would always go to him and probably someone on the exec level at BFI for sign off. So yeah, we did check things through with a lawyer. But on the whole, we try to, they're busy. So we try and create the frameworks so there's enough guidance and clarity that us sort of working in the coal mine kind of thing can know what decisions we can make and at what point we need to refer up. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. A big round of applause for Annie. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will have a short handover to the next presentation. So if you're planning to go to other sessions, now's the time to do it. We hope you stay with us. But we're just going to switch over the tech and get ready. Thank you.